Here.
All right, so call to order. Please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I do not have a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome to our February 23rd Tiverton School Committee meeting. Going to ask for, do we have a consent agenda? We don't really, oh yeah, we do. We have the minutes, all right. Ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Opposed? Take that as unanimous. So we move to item, do I have the right agenda? Yeah, all right. Move to item 7A, policy number 221, policy dissemination. This is the first reading of this policy, and I'll open the floor to comments. We don't need a motion to approve because this is the first reading. So I'll call on Mr. Dakotas first. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
No, I've read through it. Thanks to our policy subcommittee. Everything's good on my end.
Okay. Mrs. Pava?
No, I have nothing on policy 221.
Okay. Mrs. Palish
All set, thank you.
and Mrs. Farnworth?
Well, having been one of those who helped draft the changes, I have no comments at this point. I don't know if anyone had any questions though about any of them.
Do you mind actually glossing it for the public if they haven't spent the time to be able to read it or haven't had a chance to read it? Any major changes that you saw?
Well, policy 221, really, we're just bringing it up into the age of technology where, and I don't have it up in front of me right now.
Okay.
I believe it was to add some language that made it clear that policies can be accessed on the school district website as opposed to on a computer disk or in a big book at each of the administrative sites. I think in today's world, everything is electronic and we just updated it to reflect that.
Okay.
Right, so it's available on the website, and there will be one hard copy that will be available now only at the administrative office.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys, and thank you to the. Yep.
Ask a question. Deb just made me think about something. So the only place that there will be a hard copy will be in the administrative office policy manual. They will no longer be available at town hall, correct?
No,
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think there was any reference to them ever being at town hall, were there? Were they?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. They used to be sent down to town hall once they were approved or revised or whatever, but I don't know.
that wasn't in the policy, but that may have been practice.
It was a practice. It was a practice.
All right, great. And good. Any questions or comments from our administrators or from the public?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay, great. So again, this will be taken up at our next meeting for the second reading. Moving to item 7B, policy number 1145, service animal policy. Again, I'll open the floor to discussion, starting with Mrs. Palish. Maybe you can give us a quick 10 words. Any major changes or anything that struck you?
Actually, why don't we, Peter had the changes to this one, I believe. So why don't we have
Okay.
Peter just gloss over what he was doing here?
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. We do not, the Tiverton Public Schools currently does not have a service animal policy. And this is something that's been sent out to administrators across the state, actually probably across the country, to start considering this. So we collected a few policies from other districts, worked with our attorney to put something together that best reflects how we could service the students in Tiverton if in fact someone needed an animal to be with them.
May I comment? I do want to go through the policy again because I pulled up, I don't know if it was 325 something that it was based on. And I had a couple of questions. Will I be able to ask those questions at the next meeting?
Yes.
If I don't, when I read through it, decide that I am answering my own questions, I'd like to ask those questions at the next meeting, if that's possible.
Yeah, that's always possible at the second
Okay.
reading.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's it.
We can always table it or continue to revise it. There's no obligation to necessarily approve it the next time. All right. Mr. Dakotas?
Nothing on this one, thank you.
And Mrs. Farnworth?
I have nothing, although Dr. Larkin, you keep referring to this as item 7, A, B, C, D. My agenda says 5. Am I?
You know, I have been wondering if I've got the right agenda, so I may have opened up the wrong email.
I have 5 also. I have it under 5.
Okay, thank you.
Well, like everybody else, I get about 1,000 emails a day. I try to.
Were you potentially looking at like the minutes of an old one or something?
I thought I was looking at
You
the
may have
right.
been looking at a first draft of the agenda too.
I got it. Yep, you're right. I was looking at a. So as I said, 1,000 emails a day. I have to delete about 997 of them.
Oh, you and everyone else.
So all right. So yes, we're on actually 5B.
Thank you.
That's where the service animals belong. All right. So Mrs. Palish or Mrs. Farnworth, anything else on the service animal policy?
All set.
Okay. And any questions or comments from our administrators or from the public?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay. Just don't ever. Okay. So then we move to item 5C. 5C. Yep. Policy 1109, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Policy and procedure. I don't know which of the three of you want to take this one.
Peter, this was just some small tweaks on this one, right? Just to kind of bring it into what we actually do.
Exactly, Ms. Palace. There was a section in here about a separate file for medical notes and things like that. We just updated that to reference it's a file in the policy. It said envelope. And then we require everyone to sign a confidentiality agreement. And we've embedded the confidentiality agreement in the employee manual. So to make it a one-time sign. So just sort of streamlining the policy and putting the sign off in a place that people can access it much more easy.
Okay, thank you. And any questions from any of the committee members? I'm gonna make this a free-for-all.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. And any questions from our administrators or the public?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay. So everyone can unmute at will and jump in here. All right. Item 5D, policy number 333, spending plan, transfer of funds authority. Deb, Diane, Peter, you wanna?
Diane, you want to take this one?
Sure. Let me just pull it up on my screen. So we did have this policy in place, policy 333. Of course, what you see on your draft is a major revision. In essence, what it does is gives the school committee the responsibility and the superintendent the accountability to report any major movement of funds between budget categories. In other words, even though we have a one number appropriation from the town, it is our responsibility to monitor the expenditures as they take place, and any major variations or deviations from the established budget, we're asking that they be reported to the school committee. We came up in looking at a number of other municipalities and school committees. We came up with a $20,000 benchmark that we would want to monitor as shifting between any of the major budget categories, and those are listed at the bottom of your page.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Any
I
questions?
do
or comments?
have, Peter, I do have an addition to this. Where it says the school committee will receive monthly budget versus actual statements from the superintendent. I would like the next line to say the school committee will also receive quarterly balance sheet information or reconciled balance sheet. How about this? The school committee will also receive a quarterly reconciled balance sheet.
That's in the second paragraph in red.
Yep. Second,
Diane, can I speak to that? I'm
Sure.
sorry, Deb, can I speak to that, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Larkin, I should have addressed you. So there, Deb, there are many accounts on the balance sheet that don't get reconciled until the end of the year because there's no activity in it.
that's
So-
okay. Then we'll see quarterly that it won't change.
Okay,
So Deb, just to make sure I have the correct language you want after line 1, paragraph 2. The school committee will also receive a quarterly balance sheet.
Yes.
Okay,
Because maybe the question will be why isn't it changing, et cetera. I won't know until I see it, but I mean, if it doesn't and there's a reason for it, then, we can certainly, there won't be a lot to talk about.
All right. Elaine, any questions or comments?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
I was
Mike.
waving my head no, sorry.
Okay, yeah. And Deb or Diane, any other comments? And any other comments?
Sorry, I was on mute. Just one more question on this. Deb, did we put in any kind of, no, we didn't establish how the monitoring would take place, right? So I guess we would leave that up to the school administration to come up with a routine, a reporting form or something along those lines. Deb?
You mean how those things will get reported to us at the next meeting?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll leave that up to them, how they report it to us, whether it's in a report, on a consent agenda, or,
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Any questions or comments or concerns from our administrators? And anything from the public?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Thank you, Julie. All right, so again, these are first readings. We will return to this at our next meeting for the second reading. That's how it works. All right, so we are on item number 6. Still have the wrong agenda. What happened? All right. Old business, I'm gonna ask for motion to settle or to table item 6A.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Any opposed? I'll take that as unanimous. Item 6B, FY22 budget update. Dr. Sanquioni?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to share my screen with you momentarily to show you some slides. We're going to continue the discussion about next year's budget, our current status, and provide some more information about the budget itself. Okay, we'll move right into it. There's a lot of information that we've been sharing with you, and I don't want to be totally redundant, but I do want to set the stage for the new information we're going to share with you tonight. And it's important, and it's a salient point to make that our current budget reflects the cuts that are on this document here, that 24.2 positions and a few stipended positions were removed from the FY20 budget to the FY21 budget. And this was a baseline for us.
Dr. Sanquioni, before you move further, and I hope this doesn't throw you off your rhythm here, but my question is, do you recall exactly how much savings we needed to obtain that was reflected in these cuts?
Ooh,
Am I just putting you on the spot and you, I apologize.
You're putting me on the spot, but that's okay. And I don't know the number by memory. And I'd say to Amy Roderick, if she knew it, she would yell it out, and not hearing her voice.
You
So
mean the savings that we needed last year, Diane?
Yeah, how much in savings did we achieve with these cuts? Just to kind of understand what we're looking at this year.
Approximately 1.4 million.
Yeah, and it wasn't just in the positions, it was a lot of cuts.
It was
Correct.
three,
Well,
too.
I understand that, Dr. Larkin. These positions though was it 800?
It's exactly the number I was thinking it was.
Okay, I just didn't remember.
Yeah.
It was about $800,000 for the positions.
All right, thank you. Dr. Sanquioni, I'll let
No
you.
problem. And I certainly will add that in onto the title of this slide, because I'm sure I'm going to be showing this multiple more times before the FTR. Okay, so we understand that we made a lot of significant cuts to our personnel last year, as you've already referenced, and a lot of other areas too in our expenses. But we started formulating this year's budget, and the number that is always in red, the number that needs to be achieved, is a $33.9 million budget. We're looking at how to achieve that, and we're looking at a town appropriation plus 4%. That gets us to 32.5. We know there's a deficit there, still a 1.4. And we recognize that there are not the funds we had in previous years, fund balance and Medicaid, to help us out here, because we've drained those accounts through the years. And part of the presentation this evening will show where those funds have been used.
Dr. Sanquioni, can I just, only because I don't want that number out there, that town appropriation, that's only like a 1.2% increase because of the cut in state aid.
Exactly.
I don't want people to think that's a 4%. It's not. It's 4% on the municipal piece plus the decrease in state aid, which is really only about a 1.2% increase if my math is right.
And you are correct, Ms. Ballas, you're right. Thank you. All right, so we're in a position now where we need to achieve a $33.9 million budget, and there's a ways to go to help us get there. So now the next part of the presentation is looking at and answering the question, how do we get there? How do we get to a position last year where we had to cut $1.4 million to break even, so to say, and this year we're looking at another significant cut. How did that happen? And so there's some charts I'm going to share with you this evening that sort of look at a historical perspective. Some of these years were before I arrived here, and so Ms. Palish and Ms. Fondworth, I appreciate your help in helping create these, and also to chime in and help in the explanation part of this also. But so in starting, this first chart here looks at the school department compared to inflation. So if you look at the chart to the left there, you can see the inflation rate in the yellow. You can see the actual appropriation growth rate in red, and you can see the vast difference in 2017, 18, 19, where we were well below we had that one good year in 2020 where our budget got an increase that we desperately needed. And then again, for this year's budget, it was below. So when you fund your schools below inflation, and when you know all your costs are going up, like health insurance and transportation, things like electricity and so forth, you're starting to create this problem. And it goes back to 2017, even prior to that, where your revenue is not keeping up with your expenses. You're filling gaps with one-time revenue. And when the one-time revenue is no longer available, you have a really significant deficit. So let me pause there on this chart and ask Ms. Farnworth, who's really provided me a lot of this information, did some of the work on this, if there's anything else she'd like to add on this chart.
No, I think you covered it well, Dr. Secchione. Taking the average inflation rate that, can be found online at the inflation calculator and just plugging that into what we actually received versus, what it would have been had we kept up with inflation. What you're seeing is an ever-growing accumulated deficit.
Okay, so the next chart then.
I have one comment there as well, is that different sectors of the economy have different inflation rates, and traditionally healthcare and education always are higher than, say, groceries or some durable goods and things like that. So, anything that's underestimating our costs.
Dr. Larkin, they also do have sort of a congregate inflation rate that accounts for sort of all the variables. I don't want to call it an average, but there is one that you can sort of apply it universally. And I'm not sure if that's what the source was for this, but yeah, the usinflationcalculator.com is probably fairly accurate.
No, I know that, but I'm speaking more specifically to education tends to rise faster than, that's just an issue within that sector of the economy. Certain sectors of the economy rise faster than others in terms of their inflation rates. I know that because I know healthcare does, for whatever reason.
We all know healthcare does.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure education does as well.
Yeah, we do have built-in fixed costs that continue to rise, and I think that drives it.
Dr. Sanquioni, the 2020 growth rate, that was from the alternate budget that passed. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mike.
That's why it's so high? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was our budget that passed, exactly. Yep, the 1 year.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as great as it was, it can't make up for the other 5-6 years that were so far below.
Yeah, well, you can certainly see it didn't even sustain us 1 year to FY21. And it evaporated, and we were right back to making those cuts. All right, so let's move on. And the next one is rather an interesting chart. It again helps explain the situation the schools are in now. And so now we're looking at income from town taxes, and an interesting way to look across this here. And the key thing, I believe, is when you look at the increase decrease, which would be the third column over from the school appropriation, how little the budget has gone up except for FY20. You look at state aid, which is really the driver of how our budget has increased. And then you look over at the town portion, the last column there in the chart, and this is the one that really is eye-opening. And that shows you how much our budget is being supported by the town of Tiverton. So, if I was just to go down in order with FY16 as a baseline, if you look at FY17, it's a negative 0.5%. 17 is 0.1%, 0.4% in 19. Again, in 20, we finally have a little bit of a breakthrough year that sustained us for 1 year. And then 21, it's 0. So again, it's showing you combined, we're below inflation. We're showing that very little of the town revenue is continuing to rise with the schools need, which again is putting us in this position we're in now, where we need a significant increase in our budget just to meet a level service budget. So again, with that being said, I call upon Ms. Farnsworth or Ms. Palace, who again, we're great in assembling this data. If there's anything else here they'd like to emphasize?
No, I think you explained it well, Dr. Sanquioni. I mean,
Just want to
Yeah.
give you the chance. You guys did some great work. It was a pleasure working with you too on this. Okay, so we'll move on. Again, we're showing how this whole thing has come together over the years. Now we're looking at, let me just get my numbers here. Oh, the actual appropriations to the school compared to the overall budget. And okay, you can see this, if you look at the chart at the top, you can see the school appropriation, the municipal appropriation, and the split, the two numbers there, percent schools, percent municipal equals 100%. All right, so you're looking at 61.3 as a baseline in FY16, and where the town had 38.7, and you can go right on down and you can see that the schools slowly come below a baseline of 61.3%. So our percent of the revenue is also coming down. So again, you combine a percent of the revenue is coming down with inflation, with rising costs, with contracted, with fixed and mandated costs. It's just, again, this recipe for disaster. And just as a way to kind of understand it a little closer, just go back to FY16 where we were at 61.3% of the budget. If we had just maintained that, again, we wouldn't have had the deficits that we're experiencing this year and certainly last year when we had to make those cuts. So you can follow the way I chart. So, our pot of revenue is coming down at a time when everything else is going up. And then certainly the town creeps up a little bit here and there. So again, I'll pause here. It's a lot of information. But again, it just helps explain that this is not a one-time phenomena. This has been creeping up on us for probably a decade now. And it's just, it's at a position now where we really need some support.
My only comment here would be, I do want to acknowledge that the town was supporting us from a capital aspect, as in we passed the high school bond, we passed some elementary school bonds. So, certainly there were some bonds that were being passed, but from an operational standpoint, which is, day-to-day teaching the kids, they definitely, constraining that budget year after year after year, as you said, in combination with the inflation, really has gotten us to, where we are. And certainly, people could make an argument that, well, I think you should only be 60.3 versus 61.3. And they have a right to make that argument, but they do need to understand the impact that is having on the school operations and the operational budget. And, that is what's driven, this $1 million deficit. Millions, I should say.
And I think just to add on to that, the purpose of this slide is really just to, look at it as an exercise. It's not to advocate for a certain percentage. It's certainly not how our town operates. It's just to show that being subjected to such uncertainty on an annual basis, and really over time watching it, watching that share decline, even a little bit, with the size of our budget as it is, small declines do matter, and they do accumulate over time.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Thank you. Okay, so continuing on, looking at fund balance now. Now, the fund balance has been a great savior of the public schools. As you know, you put almost a little over $1 million in last year to help get the budget somewhat balanced, in the sense we still cut 24.2 positions, but you use Medicaid funds, you use fund balance funds, so we didn't have to make any deeper cuts. And as you can see on the top chart there, the yellow is the school's fund balance, the maroon is the town, and you can see that the schools had significant fund balances in 16, 17, and 18, and it starts to come down in 19 and 20. And you can see the amounts on the right-hand side. And the important thing to understand here is two things. The investment and the wise decision of the school committee to improve the schools, the safety, the lighting, the roof, the heating system, the ventilation, all the things that were in there that the fund balance helped contribute to. These improvements were why the Tiverton Public Schools, which is one of the few school districts in Rhode Island, could open on September 28th, K-12, all students in and remain in, because we have excellent air exchange. We have windows that open. We're allowed, the schools are safe and from that aspect. And it was certainly an amazing investment that, not knowing a pandemic was coming, but paid off in a way that we're continue to educate our students to the highest level possible. So the money, my point I want to make twofold here, that this money was wisely invested and is paying off in huge dividends. And the second thing that shouldn't be lost on this is, we work on that 5-year capital plan with RIDE, and we're in the throes of it, as you know, right now, changing that over. And when we do that, the projects that are on that plan are entitlement are meet up for reimbursement from RIDE. So on some of these projects that took place here as late back as FY 19 and 20, you were using fund balance money to pay off and to do some of these improvements. And as a result, there was reimbursement back from the fund balance funds that the school used to the tune of almost $700,000. And that money goes into the town fund balance. So our revenue gets reimbursed back to the town. And I think that's an important point when we're looking at a huge deficit this year. That revenue was once the schools, it's now gone to the town, and how can that be looked at maybe a little bit differently? So again, 2 points here. Wise investments paid off on huge dividends for education, and there is a reimbursement back there. So let me pause on this chart here and see if there's any things that could be added or questions.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
My only comment on this one, just because it's often confused, the school's fund balance is a restricted school fund balance. So if we get an appropriation and we don't spend it all, it goes into a restricted fund balance. The town fund balance is the general fund balance for the town, not the municipal side. The town, which includes the schools. Sometimes people confuse that. It is the town general fund balance. That's the money that we have to draw on for emergencies, which includes town and schools. And we have to draw on to, offset taxes or, to pay for the budget. But that revenue is not municipal, it's whole town, which includes, obviously both budgets.
Great point, Ms. Palace.
Thanks, Deb. And again, thanks, Peter, Diane, and Deb for sort of pulling all this information together. I'm going to open the floor to other questions or comments. I'll let Mike.
Okay, do you want to finish this? We have one more chart to go.
Okay, all right. Sorry, not you.
I may have led you to think we were close to the end, but we are close to the end. And so
Okay.
one more chart to look at, and it's Tiverton fits into a category kind of community when Rhode Island looks at how to group communities together as a rural community. And so when you use that factor, you can see a bunch of towns listed on the left-hand side that are classified the same as Tiverton. And so what this chart is showing is the amount of expenditure in 2018 in yellow and in 2019 compared to the whole budget of that town.
And Dr. Secchione, if you don't mind, I'll help with. This information is taken directly from the Rhode Island Municipal Transparency Portal. And the reason we only have 2 years here that are available to look at is because it's a relatively new program and certainly a new tool. We only had 2 full years of data to pull from. And, it was a surprise to me, actually, at first, that Tiverton is considered part of the rural group. But when I look at the comparisons, it does make sense. I mean, Tiverton is a rather large town land-wise, but there are certainly large swaths of the town that have low levels of population. So it does make sense that we're part of that rural grouping.
Yeah, so the point, and if you looked on the right side where you see that those percentages, and you see Tiverton down second from the bottom up at 54.1 in 18, 51.4 in 19. You can see it's one of the lowest of the rural communities. It's North Shoreham and Charleston. I'm not sure where those communities, how I don't even know how North Shoreham operates with that.
That's Block Island, Dr. Sinkioni.
Block Island. All right. Thank you for that. I can get up on my Rhode Island towns here. But comparatively to other towns on that list that I can relate to that are similar that I think educationally to Tiverton, again, it just shows you that percentage being allocated to the schools is much lower. So again, just another comparison that helps frame the picture that this is an ongoing issue for many years that's put us in this precarious situation right now. So again, I just want to close with two last things. I'm going to remind everyone that that's our budget number. That's the number that must be achieved to avoid any future cuts. I understand that the FTR is going to be moved. I believe it's now a date in late June, which makes life a lot harder for us because we have a June 1st deadline for if we want to non-renew or lay off people. So it's going to take some real good thinking between now and then to think about how we want to deal with this, not knowing what our final budget may be until late June. So again, that May 15th, as soon as I know the exact date, I'll change this, but I want to make the committee aware right now that that's going to be a tougher situation for us. And then in closing, I continue to be asked, what are you going to do? What's the school department, what's the school committee going to do if in fact we don't achieve this budget? And I'll just remind you that, as you saw in earlier presentations, our expense accounts are bare bones what we need. There are things in there that just almost all of it cannot be cut. So if you can't cut your expense accounts like we did last year, it places the burden on staffing. And as you saw, the 24.2, we're looking at the same number potentially. And last year we trimmed out things and our principals work exceedingly hard to make the least impact on students. We wouldn't be able to open next year if we have to cut another 20 plus teachers. So two things that have been out there. There's been a request to evaluate closing a school. So I plan to make that presentation to the school committee in the future about what that would look like. Could you do that? What the savings would be. I could say to you right now that what you may think are truly significant savings are not going to actually be there. And then the last thing is to evaluate regionalization. And again, we're doing that analysis right now too, and know that I will present that to you at a future meeting too. I know these last two are probably the most unpalatable things that we could do as a school system. But if there's a potential of having a deficit that could rise above $2 million, I think these are the unfortunate type of decisions that are going to be facing us. So, I don't want to say that that's where we are now. I remain positive that the 33.9 can be achieved. 2 years ago, we achieved the 5.5% increase when it was necessary. And if we continue to work with the town and our constituents and our parents and educate them about the need for this budget, I think we can be successful on that FTR whenever that date should be. So there you have it. You have a lot of information that kind of gives the historical way we got to where we are now. And we'll continue to update you on every meeting.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. Mike? You're muted, Mike.
No, I'm actually not. I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's a fine line, isn't it?
Sometimes people do want to mute me. But no, it's just, it's a stark reality. Even though 2 years ago, we rallied the public to come out and support an alternate budget, which gave the schools, I think at the time was about $450,000. It wasn't even quite enough. Then we faced a pandemic, which obviously no one could see coming. And then I know a couple of years before that, I think when I was on the budget committee in 2018, when we're doing the 19 budget, I think the school committee came and said they just requested a level fund that year. That's when the reserves were high. And I never think it's a good idea to dip into the reserves to pay for operating. I mean, but the school department was forced to do it. And now we're in a really precarious situation. So what I could say is the best remedy for this will be to educate and get the word out and let especially parents know this is what we need to do to keep our schools, and we want to improve our schools. We don't want to take more from what we're already doing. So this is a really bad spot. And I appreciate, Diane and Deb helping create some of these slides previously. And Dr. Sanquioni saying this now because if this FTR gets moved past June 1st and we have these obligations that we have to do, this is going to be as bad or worse than it was last year. And I hope we don't do that. So let's pray. But those are my comments. Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate the reality.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Elaine?
I'd just like to thank Deb, Diane, Amy, Dr. Sanquioni. I know you've all worked very hard. Get this presentation together, give us some good hard figures and information. But I guess there's still a lot in front of us. And if that date does get moved, depending, it's going to get moved. I've been told that's going to get moved. I don't think that's going to help us. But I will hope for the best. We have to get a lot of good public relations out there, get our parents involved, and hope that we can get what we need to survive at least. And that's all I have to say.
So Peter, can you go through with us again the calendar and the statutory requirements with regard to potential layoffs? Is really no good way of putting that. We have a certain date by which, if we don't have, we have to, exhibit good faith that if we don't think we have the budget to to support a certain payroll, then we have to, make some decisions about that. And it's driven, again, by requirements in law, which moving the FTR really hamstrings us that way.
Dr. Locke, can you just really explain, I think almost answered your own question. The date is June 1st. That's the date that we have to inform any staff member of a layoff regarding budgetary reasons. And again, I'm hearing the FTR is going to be on June, get my date here.
The date that was shared last night was June 27th.
June 27th, which that's a tough position for us to not know not knowing our final budget till then. So, my point to you folks is, we'll continue to have this on the agenda every meeting. We'll, as you heard me say, I'll start doing presentations on some of those tough topics like a school closing or regionalization, and how many layoffs would be necessary to get a budget that's well below what we're asking for, and show you the impact of that, along at the same time working more diligently on doing as many presentations. And I know I speak for every principal out there. They're doing great work too with their PTOs and their school improvement teams, and making everyone aware that, we need to rally everyone to show up and vote on June 27th. But to your point, June 1st is the date.
So Dan, was there any realization that was an issue? Because I don't think the town has the same kind of.
No, first of all, Dr. Sanquioni, I misquoted. It's I'm looking at a calendar now. It would be June 26th. 27th, a Sunday, so I can't see that being the date. And all of the related deadlines will be moved accordingly. As far as what that is to us is our deadline to submit our final request will be moved in line with the move of the FTR date. So if this is a 5-week move, it would extend us by 5 weeks before we have to turn in our final budget. I don't know if this will result in a delay of your appearance before the budget committee or not. That's something I suppose you can speak with them about.
Yep.
Also, on the bright side of this move, and I can understand their reasoning for wanting to do this. None of us, neither the town nor us, none of us know what the figures are going to be for state and or federal aid.
Right. And
We've all been told that there's going to be stimulus that should be flowing down to the states, and none of that has materialized as of yet. It's still very much an unknown, and I firmly believe that was the driving force behind the decision of the town to delay the FTR. It is really just that high level of uncertainty with regard to aid, because it could change. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to solve our problems, but it could certainly change our picture for this fiscal year should, a large amount of aid come our way. We just at this point don't have that information.
no, I totally get that. And I agree that in other, if all else being equal, you would sort of say, yeah, sure, go ahead, delay it. We have let's just call it peculiar or particular budget process. But what we come up against, which we can't change locally, is that June 1st issue. And so I don't know how, I'm just wondering how you finesse that, and whether or not that was even something they were aware of in the discussion.
So we're going to be far from the only school district in the state facing this.
Yeah. Are there school districts or other towns that are delaying their? I mean, everybody has to have their budget to the state on June 30th, right?
Yes.
So, all right. So that's an unanswered question. All right. Anybody else from the committee have a question or comment? Otherwise, I'm going to open it to the public and the administrators.
I just wanted to quickly, Dr. Sanquioni, just so we know what to expect. So your focus for us, if we get, say, $1, and because of that June 1st deadline, your focus, I think I heard, you're going to be talking about how can we do K through 12, or how can we do some version of not K through 12? Yes, just really high level.
I want to lay out every option for you.
Okay.
Ultimately, this is your call, and certainly as educators, we'll make recommendations. If it's $1, the recommendations are draconian at best. So we'll lay out how to get to a balanced budget, but these are going to be, you're going to have to look at some tough things. You're going to have to look at things like regionalization and closing schools and so forth. So we'll lay it all out for you in black and white, what it saves and what happens, and work with you on making the best of some bad decisions.
So maybe time-wise, end of March. I mean, like Diane, I'm hoping we get some information from the federal level, but are you thinking maybe end of March, beginning of April? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I think in fairness for us to do a good job with it and to get the right data, and then secondly to, be fair to our staff too.
Yep.
What could happen, which is
I
tough.
hear you. Okay, thank you. That was it for me, Dr. Larkin. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from our administrators?
Dr. Larkin, this is Mr. Cabral. One thing I would like to add to this whole conversation is, the school committee and Dr. Sanquioni has put together an excellent presentation based on the last 5 years. But this whole budget deficit has gone on for more than years. We've probably been many years in Tiverton, and it's just getting worse and worse every year. I know there's only so much data we can put out there for people to absorb, but we've been funding the schools or under at least 10 years because of the balance, but the reserve fund. And, and we've been talking, I know that Deb has been talking, Diane's been talking to it for many years, as far as at some point, we're going to get to where we can't fund the schools, and we're at it. But this is the year that we're definitely not going to be able to fund the schools without getting additional money into the budget.
I agree, Manny. This is the day we knew would come. And, I think the pandemic accelerated that because we got absolutely no increase in funding last year. So thank you. Anyone else from our administrators or staff on the call or on Zoom? I don't know why I can't see everybody. Any comments or questions from the public?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I think we're up to item 6C, the FY21 year-to-date budget versus actuals. Ms. Roderick?
Yeah, so I apologize. My camera on the laptop isn't working, so unfortunately, you don't have, I guess, either you're lucky that you don't have the benefit of my face or not. But I had prepared in the packet a budget to actual as of January, and bear with me 1 second. And we are on track to spending consistent with the same time last year. Although I do want to point out that as of yesterday, our CRP was approved, our grants with RIDE. So some of the expenses that we have here are actually going to be moved off and moved to the grants now that that has been approved. So actually our spending has actually been very conservative in terms of only the necessary items are being spent on. If there's anything that's discretionary that we can do without, we certainly are doing without. And the principals are doing a fantastic job of remaining within their budgets. For the most part, the information in the packet is fairly self-explanatory. So I'll leave it open for questions at this point if you have specific line items that you'd like to ask about.
Okay, thank you, Amy. And we miss seeing you. And if anybody is wondering, I am in a darkened car because I didn't make it out of work in time to get there. So if it's spooking you out, I can turn off my camera. All right. Mike, any questions?
No, thank
Elaine?
Nothing, no questions.
Deb?
Amy, CRP, is that 230,000 we were waiting for, or was that something else?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The CRP is all of our grants with RIDE, like Title I, IDEA,
Oh, gotcha.
and all of that. So we have been waiting up until this point. They've been behind because they were tied up with that 233,000 that you're speaking of, and managing all those other grants that came down as part of the stimulus package. For example, I know that under IDEA, we have approximately 300,000 in grants that will help cover some of the ODP costs. So some of that will be moving off. And then we have, other programs, Title II for professional development, and things like that. So any possible expense that we've incurred that is legitimate and can be transferred to the grants, that is our plan to do that. So
we'll see that on the next update. So what about the 233? So are all of those expenses on here without that grant? Have we got that grant yet?
Yes, we've gotten that, and those expenses have all been moved to that grant. The only expenses that continue to be on here related to that are the COVID expenses, for which we're still awaiting the stimulus money that Diane spoke about earlier. So for example, if you notice under general supplies and materials, object code 56101, It looks like we've blown through that budget pretty quickly. However, there's still if I believe correctly, the last presentation I made, there's about 193,000 in uncovered COVID expenses. About 150,000 of that is currently sitting in the supplies and materials line. So anything related to the 233 has already been moved off this report.
Oh, okay.
Onto the grant.
Oh, all right. And that was that other piece of the state aid that we were supposed to get, the 233. So that's already off here. And now this is just anything that wasn't covered by that.
Correct, yes.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
That was it,
Okay.
Jerry. Thank you.
All right.
So
thanks.
Amy, can I
Yes.
just ask one more question? Are we expecting or hoping for any other reimbursements for additional COVID expenses?
We're waiting on the stimulus. So if it comes, it'll come in that form. We are, RIDE still has not heard from the US Department of Education about how those funds can be spent. And then of course that has to trickle down through the legislature about whether they're going to be using that going forward to maybe backfill some of the shortages in state aid, or whether it will actually be extra funds for us to address those COVID expenses. It's still all up in the air, and there, on all the RIASBO calls, no one has heard anything. And I even spoke with RIDE yesterday, and they still haven't heard a word. So it's all up in the air, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. And I probably asked you the same question last month. It's just,
But that's okay. Nope, that's fine, because it it literally 1 minute we don't know anything, the next minute they drop a boatload of information for us to kind of digest. So it's a valid question anytime.
okay, thank you.
Any questions from the public, Ms. Delcourt?
It looks like a person from the core organization just wanted to thank Mr. Cabral. You are right on point, she said. So I'm assuming that's from his previous comment. That is the extent of the comments.
Okay, thank you. I find Mr. Cabral is always right on point. All right. And any other comments or questions from our administrators? Okay. So we are up to new business item 7A. School committee resolution.
Dr. Larkin, I would ask that we table this item.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any opposed? I'll take that as unanimous. Item 7A is tabled. I think Dr. Sanquioni wanted to pull 7B as well. I don't know if we need to actually vote on that. There's any, if anyone feels any differently, please speak now from the committee. And am I correct, Dr. Sanquioni, you wanted to pull 7B?
Not needed.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move to 7C, THS, TMS class size reports. Mr. Ashley, Mrs. Craven.
If I could introduce this, Dr. Larkin.
Sure.
As per the request of the school committee, you may recall we did this last year. We give you an insight into the class sizes of all the classes offered at the middle and the high school. As you know, you get a monthly report from us that shows our enrollment, and on that report you can see the elementary class sizes, but at the middle high school, because it's so convoluted, we can break it down to you now in the documents you have. There's a lot of information on the documents in your packet, and it certainly needs some explanation. So if we could start with the middle school with Ms. Craven, she can talk you through some of the numbers there and answer any of your questions.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
Absolutely, thank you. So one of the packets in which you have is a breakdown of all of the teachers, the sections in which they teach, and the number of students in each section. So if you're looking at, for example, the first page, and you see lower numbers where you see Mr. Toms with a STEM class, some of those classes are 2 sections combined depending on the day. So for days 1 and 4, Mr. Toms might have section 1 combined with section 3, so it would be, you're looking at, well, actually, it's a 16 with 6, so you're looking at a class size of 23. So when you're looking at those lower numbers, you have to realize that it's part of the scheduling process, that there are times when the sections meet together, yet independently as well. On an average, because we lost grades 5th and 6th last year, so those class sizes in the lower or upper elementary numbers are higher. You're averaging around a class size of 20 to 23 students. Where in 7th and 8th grade, where the class overall number is lower, your class size average is anywhere between 18 and 21.
Okay. Just looking at that. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the committee? Mrs. Pava, I'll let you go first. Lane, you're muted.
Maybe she stepped away.
Yeah, okay. Mrs. Palish, we know you didn't step away.
What are these printed out of, Sue?
Aspen.
Oh, okay. Well, good for you guys. This is hard to make sense of. I'm sure you guys understand it, but just
Right,
the-
and that's why I felt it was important, and Dr. Santioni agreed that, you know, we are available to answer questions, because it does, you know, from just looking at it and not knowing the scheduling process, it can look somewhat confusing. So I'm here to answer any of the questions you may have.
Exactly. That's that's why it was very helpful to, you know, for you to say, you know, that, you know, you see, just because you see a class of 6, that doesn't mean it's a class of 6.
Right, and then you can look at even some of the class sizes, the way you see a 1 and a 2. Those numbers are interventionist, so like math intervention and reading specialists, and those numbers change all the time depending on the RTI process. So kids come in and out, and then, you know, they get exited when they make significant academic progress. So, you know, those are very fluid numbers as well.
And that's the art of the schedule, correct? That you're trying at all times to maximize the amount of kids that are, you know, in classes, but at the same time, we do have individual needs, and we're trying to meet those as well.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Okay. Thanks, Sue.
Yep.
Okay, Ms. Farnworth?
Okay, so Mrs. Craven, the third to the last column. So I'm looking right now at TMS page 5 on our packet. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody. I'm just trying to understand it. So for the top line, you have an ELA class. It says FY, which is full year, I assume. What is that next box telling me? Period 2?
So I'm going to,
And this,
I might have a different page
we'll
than you
just pick
have.
anyone.
All right, so if you have the course number, the section, the description of the course, the teacher's name, the
Yep.
total currently enrolled, the max class size, depending on contractual obligations or special education class sizes, right?
Oh, wait a minute. Where am I seeing that?
They don't have that, Sue.
No, we don't have that,
Doesn't have
Sue.
that. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the
Oh.
one I have.
So we have
I
a
have the teacher's name.
Yep,
Actually listed twice. Then I have a FY, which again, I assume is full year.
yep,
And then this next box is P2, and then in parentheses, D1 dash
yeah,
D.
okay. That's period 2, day 1, day 4. That's
Oh,
what I was speaking about.
okay, thank you. And then I have to assume it's the room number and the number of students. Okay.
No, not at all. So you'll see in those parentheses, you'll have day 1, day 4, and then also in addition to that, you might have day 2, day 5, and that's
Yep.
when you get those two numbers combined
Yep.
on specific dates or
Okay.
dates.
Thank you. Well, I think what this is telling us, and just at a high level, is that we don't have a lot of class sizes that are too small,
Correct.
that we would be able to absorb a big number, a big constriction, if you will.
Right, because you do have those contractual obligations. I mean,
You do.
we have to abide by those numbers.
Yep.
And you can't exceed those, and you wouldn't want to, right? It
Oh,
just,
no.
you're gonna lose, once you drive up those class size numbers, your instruction is not the same. So that's definitely something we focus on and keep our eyes on as we navigate through this unfortunate process.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike?
Yeah, Mrs. Craven, is 25 the max class size of the middle school?
It is.
And what would you say before the pandemic, what would you say the ideal size would be across the board? If you had to pick a number. If I had to ask all the teachers and we took an aggregate number.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal class size, I would say, would be anywhere between, 16 to 20 students. But when you start going over that cap, it's
Okay.
hard to individualize instruction for kids and personalize the learning experience when you have that many students in a classroom.
All right. So with that said, I think I was making my own point. So basically anything over 20 is taking away the overall object of the teacher being able to individualize to those students. So, okay, that was my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, you're good, Mike, I guess. All right, any questions from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay, and any from any of our administrators for Mrs. Craven? Okay, I think Mr. Ashley, you're up.
Yes, thank you. So, it's a similar message to Miss Craven. First off, we're just thinking about broadly, we're averaging 18 or 19 students in a class. And those numbers vary a little bit, depending on the teacher's course load, particular electives, and as Ms. Craven talked about, really the particular needs of the students. She mentioned the interventionists, we have reading and math specialists, special education teachers where students have individualized goals. And so those classes by design are set lower so that they make sure, we talked about individualized and personalized learning, they can get their service needs that they have. The other piece at the high school too that we take a lot of pride in is the other programs that we offer. We're more than just reading, writing, math and English. We have our music and our art, our CTE programs of carpentry and engineering, and we take a lot of pride in those too. And so we're glad we can still offer them and give those opportunities to our students to pursue those passions. And so, of course, I'm happy to answer some any specific questions or clarify any points.
Okay, I am going to, Ms. Farnworth, if I could, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
I have a work obligation, so
Okay.
I'll be listening, but you won't see me.
All righty. Well, then I will open up the floor to questions from members of the committee. Elaine? I don't know if she came back to us. Okay. Mrs. Palash, do you have any questions or comments with
No.
regard to high school?
Mrs. Craven stole your thunder, Chris. Once we
Okay.
understood
No,
what we were
no,
looking
yeah,
at, it was like,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Got
no,
it.
no.
Thank
Yeah, of
you.
course.
Okay, Mr. Dakotas.
Yes, only because I don't know the answer. What is learn strategy? Sorry. I don't know
Yeah,
that.
that's the learning strategy. So If we're talking about our academic strategies instruction, that's our ASI course for students with individualized education plans.
Oh, gotcha. That's why the numbers look like that. I was saying, wow, those are a lot of kid class, 34, 32. I was trying to figure that out. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Ashley. For our CTE programs, do we have any students that are going to obtain their distinctions? I guess I can't remember the proper term for their diplomas.
We do, yeah. So we have a number of students that, and for clarification, to earn this certification, it's students who successfully complete the 3 courses in each, either the engineering or the construction. And we're pleased to say that every year we graduate a number of students that have successfully completed 3 years of those courses in each of the CTE. And so they carry those certifications forward either into the college or university level, or many of our students from these programs will go right into the job market, actually. And they'll use, for example, one of the certifications is the OSHA certification. They put that on their resume, and it's a huge selling point for them when they're talking to employers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to, and I know Mr. Dakota's asked this question already, but I do see this learning strategy assignment peppered throughout the schedule. Would I be correct in saying that a teacher would have a mixture of IEP and or 504 students with non-IEP students, and those would be added together for the purposes of assessing how many students are actually in a class?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. So it's not a separate class with, let's say, 2 students. It's
No, right.
okay. It's a class with the one I'm looking at right now. It's a class with 19 plus 2. So it's,
Correct.
okay. Thank you. Does anyone else on the committee have any last moment questions? Ms. Dalcourt, do we have any comments from the audience?
Not at this time, Mrs. Farnworth.
Thank you. And any other commentary from the administrators? Okay, well, hearing none, I thank you all for the presentation. It's an important thing for all of us as school committee members to understand and to keep in mind as we go through some of these difficult discussions with regard to budget, that, you know, every move that we make is going to impact the students. There's no way around it. And, you know, these are the real numbers that we're looking at here, that, you know, every number on these pages represents a student. So thank you. All right, moving on to new business. 7D fund balance update. Back to you, Ms. Roderick.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Can everyone see this, the fund balance analysis?
Yes.
Okay. So the last time we spoke about this, there was a question from Mrs. Palish about the composition of how we spent our fund balance in FY19. And as far as the numbers that I can find on the general ledger, I was not able to come up with your number, Mrs. Palish. So if you have any hints as to any projects or so that I might be missing, I'd appreciate that. However, in the end, we did spend, whether it was from capital or from operations, in 2019, we did spend 2.9 million, and our fund balance resulted in the 1.3 million. And then we've just received our final audit report, and the structural deficit in FY20 is the 857,180. So at the end of June 30, 2020, we did have a fund balance of 493,240. 241, depending on which report you're looking at. And And so really the final numbers for each year really haven't changed. And we are, of that 493, we are using about 400 this year, as Dr. Sanquioni pointed out in the budget presentation, out of the fund balance, and about 675,000 out of the Medicaid balance. As of right now, we are still on track to have to add to Medicaid by about 100,000 for this year. I'm waiting for the January Medicaid report from the region. So again, I guess there's not much to add to this other than all the reserves that we have been asked to use, whether it's for capital or whether it's for the structural deficit, have been used at this point. I'm not sure there's much else I can add, so I will open it up to questions.
I will say, Amy, that my spreadsheet came from actual minutes from school committee meetings where we actually appropriated monies for spending on capital items. That's actually Mrs. Farnworth put that together. Spent many hours going through minutes. I think you're right. It doesn't, I mean, it got spent, but maybe what we could do is, instead of saying to balance structural deficit, we could just have structural deficit / capital items.
Okay,
So,
happy to do.
Yep. So rather than, it doesn't have to be as detailed, but like I said, that spreadsheet that I sent you, that actually came from school committee minutes where we actually appropriated money to be spent on operations. And we spent quite a bit of time with the prior business manager, tying that out. I don't know, why it didn't get in the general ledger that way, but I think that's just a simple fix, is we'll just say structural deficit / capital. And then we'll,
Okay,
because you're right, it's not going to change the ending number.
okay, happy to do that.
Yeah, Deb, that's a good point out. And I think also, I mean, obviously, Amy, it was before your time, right? And secondly, all of the expenditures, be they specifically tied to the fund balance by vote or not, are going to go through the UCOA lines on the expense sheet. And that's where a lot of this over time kind of got lost in the translation. But we did take a number of votes over time, specifically to buy certain things from the fund balance that did go through the P&L. The one thing, and if you'll all just oblige me for a moment, because this came to mind the other day, where the town was able, the school was able to let the gymnasium be used for the seniors, the true elderly of our town, were able to go to the gymnasium and get their COVID vaccinations. And it really did make me think back to the time that we insisted that the handicap ramps be built on that entrance to the gymnasium. And I don't think they were ever used as much as they were last Thursday. And I was actually quite proud of the fact that we had made sure that that was taken care of a couple of years ago. So, as much as things can be a little bit doomy and gloomy for all of us, when we're talking about these numbers, that was one bright spot, at least. Does anyone else on the committee have any questions? I know I should have gone last, but. Elaine, Mike?
I have nothing.
No, thank you.
Thank you both. And thank you, Amy, for the
You're welcome.
presentation. Okay, next up, Amy Roderick again for the fiscal 20 audit presentation.
So bear with me one second. Let me share one more item. So what I have up on the screen for you right now is the memo that I drafted for the school committee outlining the audit. This was at Mrs. Farnworth's request. And so basically the highlight is the financial statements for the town of Tiverton, which includes all of the activity of the school department, received a clean opinion, which basically means we received an unqualified opinion. For those non-accountants in the room, that basically means our books and records fairly represent the financial position and activities of the town and all the various departments that they present. So I've also provided here sort of the operating summary, which I took right off of, I think it's page 23 or 24 of the financial statements. And this highlights the activity for the school department. I did not include the 2 lines related to the pension contribution because those are literally off of an actuarial report and they always equal, revenue and expense always equal. And we really have no control over that figure. But as you can see, our town appropriation and the state aid that we received a little bit of indirect cost recovery on our CRP, which is our grants with RIDE. Again, that's the Title I, IDEA, Title II, that sort of thing. We earned, I believe, roughly 6% on our expenditures. We do receive tuition from other districts for students that come to Tiverton. In particular, I believe this potentially might be part of the CTE, where I know some of our kids can go to either, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, can go to like Portsmouth or elsewhere, depending on the program that's available. But if a student comes to Tiverton, we receive some tuition for that. And then we sold a little bit of scrap metal, $500, we'll take it. Diane, do you have a question?
No, I was just celebrating the scrap metal.
Oh. And then as far as the expenditures go, the salary, they're all pretty self-explanatory. The salaries, the benefits, these are all the categories that are outlined on the financial statements. It's important to note that within these categories, these do reflect the allocation from the region. So any of the expenses that we received that we paid to them for their the regional assessment have now been taken out of that 5,500 object code and now spread among the object codes that they actually belong in. So, and that's reflected here in these numbers. Transfers out. We had submitted about 199,198 and change for housing aid reimbursement. And then we also, the early risers program, we had to transfer out to that enterprise fund because it ran short during the year, although that has been rectified for this year. So we shouldn't see that again. And the total change for the year is the 857,180, which I believe I also showed on the fund balance report for you for FY20. And our ending fund balance is the 493,240. So before I go into the management comments, I'd see if there are any questions. Is that no question so far?
I will have one. For tuitions from other districts of 17,000 does make me wonder, how much are we paying to other districts for non-special ed related tuitions? Do you have that number easily available?
So I know what our budgeted number is, but I don't know whether any of that is special education or regular education. I can get that for you. I don't have it off the top of my head, whether it's broken out.
It's just a point of curiosity to see. It's not a discussion we've had in a lot of depth as to how many students we are paying tuitions for to other districts.
Okay,
I
I
can,
can get that for you. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions? Okay, continue, Amy.
Okay, the other part of the audit, most auditors will provide what they call a management letter or management letter comments, which are basically areas for improvement. If there was anything significant or what they call a significant deficiency in our internal controls, if there was something that was really wrong in that regard, that would affect the, in very simple terms, the integrity of the numbers on our financial statements. They did not find any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. However, they did, Haig Sahadi wanted to point out a couple of things that they would like us to address, which we did address prior to the issuance of the financial statements. The first of which also speaks to what Deb was asking about earlier, which was the reconciliation of the balance sheet accounts. Some of those accounts had balances in them that went way back to even like 2010. And it took a whole lot of time to dig those out and figure out what the correct answer was as to whether they should be adjusted in the current year. They're making it a management comment this year. However, those balances have been there for several years and they did not make it a management comment in prior years. I'm not sure why that is. But they inferred that we delayed the audit, which was, we did ask for an extension, but that was so that I could take the time to make these reconcile these accounts, make them corrected, and so that we didn't have an issue going forward. So that has been resolved. So we, to Deb's point earlier, so some of the accounts get reconciled at the end of the year. There are the cash accounts get reconciled monthly. The interfund accounts, like between, say, a special revenue fund and the general fund, those get reconciled monthly. So this shouldn't be an issue going forward. The other comment was related to reconciling the due to, due from the town with the treasurer's office. Historically, well, my understanding is that historically, what that was comprised of wasn't clear to either the treasurer's office or the finance office for the school district. So it took us some extra time to reconcile that. And I worked with Denise at the town to reconcile the composition of the due to, due from. And the recommendation they had was that that be done prior to the auditors coming out for field work. That did not happen this year because we needed the auditor's assistance in figuring out what those elements were, because they in fact did the reconciliation for 2019. So we couldn't have it done because we needed further information. However, both, I believe Denise and I both have a very good understanding of what those are going forward. And we have both committed to having that reconciled well in advance of audit field work. There was a third management comment, which was basically notifying us about some future accounting guidance that we will have to implement. It was no impact on this report. Just like any other guidance that comes out, we'll certainly incorporate it as appropriate when it's issued and when it becomes effective. So with that, I know all of you are just so excited to hear me speak accounting, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, I will open it up to the floor for questions. I will start with Elaine. Do you have any questions?
No questions. I read it through before the meeting.
Thank you. Mike?
Yep, I sent him Elaine's response. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Deb?
No questions, but I enjoy the accounting talk. And if anybody would like to see the whole report, I know it's not up on the treasurer's website yet, but it will be as soon as I'm sure the auditors present to the town council. They will have the entire, she usually puts the entire audit up.
Yes, and that was delayed from last evening. I guess there was an emergency from that Haig Sahadi had to attend to, some family emergency. So that was pushed off till March 8th.
Okay, anything else, Deb?
Nope, all set.
Okay. And Amy, guess what? You got two of us. I love this stuff.
Welcome, nerds.
I guess, you know, the only comments I have, I understand what the management comments are. My personal opinion is that the do-to-do-froms between yourself and the town is something that could very easily be reconciled on a frequent basis, so that it, going forward, at least, it's not an issue whatsoever. That's just my opinion, and my hope is that, something like this wouldn't come up again. With regard to the balance sheet, it's really just a question that I have. Do we have any continuing stale dated assets that are not understood at this point?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Do we have any stale dated assets that we could potentially have some exposure for?
Are you asking about fixed assets or just assets on the balance sheet?
Balance sheet assets of any kind?
No, we do not have any that are stale. I rectified all of them as of June 30th. Everything's been reconciled and everything is current.
Okay, great. So I know there was some question as to whether or not the fund balance would be impacted, and it doesn't appear it was. So
it was not, and that was a function. That was an entry proposed by the auditors to correct something from a prior year. That went back, I believe, to either 18 or 19. And that was their proposed entry, which I disagreed with. And it turned out, as far as I could tell, and they then agreed that it was basically a lack of balance sheet cleanup for all intents and purposes. And so that's, again, that goes back to, why we asked for an extension to file with the Auditor General. But everything now is as clean as I know it can possibly be.
Okay, great. All right, do we have any questions from the audience? Julie?
Not at this time, Ms. Farnworth.
Thank you. And any questions or comments from the administration? Okay, thank you very much, Amy. I'll take you off the hot seat for now.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, next on the agenda, Dr. Larkin is still not with us, is the THS fundraiser for a field light. Dr. Sanquioni.
Thank you, Ms. Farnsworth. We were contacted by a local businessman, Mr. George Alzebek, who had been watching the presentation to the town council about trying to get the light at the field covered. And he saw the outcome of that, and he recognized our budget was in a poor position. He cares about the children in Tiverton greatly, and he was able to start talking to some other groups of people. And so he's in the process of beginning a fundraiser to help offset possibly the cost of that light pole at the stadium, or certainly a large portion of that. So I wanted to make the school committee aware of that. I'd like to give Mr. Alzebek the green light to continue his great work. I know he's already contacted one bank who's made a sizable donation, if in fact you're comfortable with this moving forward.
I'm back. So, but Elaine or Diane, you were doing such a great job.
Oh, you're in a more comfortable seat.
So Peter, are you asking us if we would gladly accept fundraising?
Yeah, I don't want this guy is doing a lot of work, and I know we usually come
Yeah.
to you at the end and say, hey, this guy just gave us 300,000 to put up a light pole.
Yeah, that's great.
This seemed a little different, and so again, I can't thank him enough for his hard work and his generosity and everything he's doing, but I just wanted to make you aware, because you may see some overture in the community, and wanted to make you aware of it and make sure you're comfortable with it.
So, I think we should actually take a vote on this. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve with thanks, Mr. Alzabak's efforts.
May I
Well,
make
we
a
don't
comment?
have the money yet.
May
No,
I
I
make a
know,
comment? May I
but-
make a comment, please?
Yep.
I hesitate to call it a fundraiser because it isn't a fundraiser. Well, I shouldn't say he has accepted, but there was some people and companies that came forward and offered to help, but when we've got something listed on the agenda as a THS fundraiser, that sounds like it's coming from the high school, that they're having some kind of fundraiser. This
That's
has
what I
nothing-
thought too,
This has
Elaine.
nothing to do with the high school, and I
Right.
certainly don't want to see it connected. I know one of the groups at the high school did not want to become involved with this, which disappointed me greatly, but he has received communication from different companies and a bank. I know that there's a bank involved that has offered to help us out, but it is not a high school fundraiser. And
Well,
it shouldn't be considered that.
And to Elaine's point, it's not a district fundraiser. So
Mhm.
once whoever has money and they would like to donate to us, then
And
at that
give it to
time, we
us.
can accept it.
We'll
Right,
take it.
So if I could just sort of make a point of order here. So I'd like to make a resolution that we approve of his efforts, not necessarily calling it a district fundraiser, but at least then he has got sort of our consent, if you will. And I think we've gone through the process, but I think we need a motion to actually enter into the discussion. If I'm not, maybe I'm making too technical a matter of this, but I think that's what we should probably do. So would anyone care to make the motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
What's the motion?
So
I
that-
guess I'm not sure what we're voting on. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. So that we approve of his efforts on behalf of making solicitations, or we approve of his efforts in trying to find funding for the replacement of the stadium light.
But that is not what is on the agenda. So now we're going to make a motion to do something that really doesn't appear that way on the agenda.
No, she's right. It says THS
sorry, but-
fundraiser.
I mean,
I
if I may
want the
make-
money, I want us to take the money, but I don't want it connected to us.
I
or the-
certainly think the fact that we've discussed it and Dr. Sanquioni has certainly identified Mr. Alzabak and his great efforts. I don't think, Elaine's right. It's not what's on the agenda. I think that certainly it's been out there. It's public enough that hopefully, people support it and they hear about it. But I have to agree that I don't think we need a motion because it's not on the agenda listed that way.
In addition, I would add the fact that it is not a fundraiser that is either being run by or sanctioned by the school. So I don't know what the authority we would have to vote on it.
Well, I suppose we can vote on whatever we want to vote on. I guess. So I can see the point of the phrasing of the agenda item. So if people just want to remain in a state of being informed and they don't have any problem with it, that's fine.
Dr. Lock, if I may, just, what your last comment is tangible. And I think just hearing publicly, and I know Mr. Alzabek's probably listening tonight, to know that the committee recognizes his efforts and is with great gratitude, would like to see him proceed is probably the best way to handle this.
And I applaud great efforts. He always helps this community in any way he can. And maybe at some point, we need to accept the donation, because those are donations. In my eyes, they're donations. And we need to recognize it that way for two reasons: to say thank you to a man that has helped this community greatly, but also so that we're using a tracking of money we received. That somewhere down the line, if somebody says, where did that $100,000 come from? We need to have something in the record. I agree, but just not as a fundraiser.
Yeah, and I like that. I like Elaine threw out $100,000, so that's the bar for you, George. So, like Elaine said, George is a fabric of our community. He helps. I know he's done multiple things. So, maybe we should just say this. Use this as a platform to say thank you, and whatever he's doing, he can continue doing, and maybe we just get an update down the road.
Okay, that is the consensus of the committee. That's fine with me.
Mr. Dakotas had made a motion. Are you going to withdraw the motion?
Yes, I will. I withdraw the motion
Thank you.
from Mr. Lucky. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So we are at any rate all on record and all are appreciative of Mr. Alzabek's efforts. So I think next is announcements, meetings, reports. So we are theoretically going before the budget committee on March 4th. You haven't heard any notification from them, Peter, that we're not doing that yet?
I have not. Nope. I consider that still to be our night.
Okay. Because that's next Thursday, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay. So,
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Prior to next week, are you still on, Dr. Secchione, for the budget committee members on Saturday?
Saturday.
That actually is going to be rescheduled.
Oh, okay.
And thank you for saying that. I was going to mention that later in the evening. So I will get you the new date on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, in the past, it's been usually the chair and vice chair, along with the superintendent and our director of finance, who go before the school committee or before the budget committee. I assume we'll be doing more or less the same next week. If others are in attendance, and a lot of times people do, we should really have it posted in case a discussion ensues and other members of the committee want to participate. So unless they reschedule it, we should post that if we could, Peter.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then we have our regular meetings on March 9th and 23rd. That's the nice thing about February and March. Always the same dates, unless it's a leap year. Any requests for agenda items on either of those two dates?
Lots of budget information coming on those dates.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be in the thick of it there. All right, any other announcements or scheduled meetings or reports? Okay, then I'm going to ask for a motion to move into executive session under Rhode Island General Law 4246 5A2 and 5A regarding legal advice, litigation, settlement agreement, and budget.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Do a roll call vote. Mrs. Farnworth,
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas,
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo,
Yes.
Mrs. Palish.
Yes.
I vote